Okay, I'll start off. I didn't go to a Christian college. I studied electrical engineering and had no inkling that I would end up on the mission field. And so when I graduated, I went to graduate school at the University of Maryland studying for my master's in engineering. And towards the end of that program, I realized this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. So from that point, I started keeping an eye out for different ministries that would possibly be of interest, like music ministry or teaching ministry. And just for me, I was influenced by the Westminster Short Catechism and John Piper, who emphasized that the purpose of men and women is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And so for me, with my very engineering mindset, was thinking, oh, okay, so I'm Don Lowe, there's obviously, of course, there's an X, Y, and a Z axis, because that's how engineers think. And there's God's glory curve, of course. And my purpose, of course, is to maximize God's glory curve. So where should Don Lowe be in order to maximize God's glory? Now, you cut away all of that. It means I think every person needs to think about where they should be in order to bring God the most glory. It's a question that you should think about now, and you should think about throughout your life. How can I bring God more glory? How can I live with purpose? And so for me, I wasn't sure, and so I eventually started taking seminary classes by extension at Fuller, and it was a very academic environment, and it seemed kind of disconnected from actual practical church work, and so that was very disheartening for me. So on a whim, I took this class for seminary credit called Encountering the World of Islam, and that sort of blew my mind, opened up just so many possibilities and so many new things. And so it was from that point I really started considering working overseas. And I was thinking, does God really need another electrical engineer in America, or does God need cross-cultural church planters for these unreached groups? Now I'm preaching to the choir here, but for me it was a pretty massive worldview shift. And it is for most of the people from my pre-missionary life. There were some people from my alma mater that I ran into. Usually someone goes to the same college, they're like, oh, you start catching up, and the person immediately said, oh, what do you do now? Oh, I'm a missionary. Jaw drop in the conversation.
Right.
So from that point, I told God, you can close the door anytime you want, but I'm going to pursue this. I'm risk adverse. I don't want to do something crazy, so I'm just going to take little baby steps towards missions. And so over a period of years, I changed the church that I was going to. I talked to a lot of missionaries, talked to missions pastors, and each step of the way, God really encouraged me to pursue that. I applied to the World Team and was accepted as a single person. I hadn't met Margaret yet. So I was looking at Muslim ministry, so I was looking primarily at Indonesia, and then I was also interested in Bible translation because some Wycliffe person told me that engineers make good Bible translators, so I was pursuing that path as well. And then, just out of the blue, I think it was an internet search, I found out there was a Bibleless Muslim people group in Cambodia, and World Team had workers in Cambodia, so I immediately looked it up, and yeah, there was work available. So I planned a vision trip to Cambodia. I think this is where you come in.
Well, I'm going to have to rewind the clock a lot because my story is really different from Don's, and eventually our stories joined, but that was quite a ways along in the journey for me. So I grew up in a Christian family that supported a lot of missionaries. My parents had a lot of friends from college who were missionaries, and they always had the pictures on the fridge. Every 4 years we get a new picture, and the kids would look love. And so my very earliest memories involve my parents talking about their friend who was a Bible translator. And yet it never occurred to me that maybe I might be a missionary until I was in high school and I took my first short-term mission trip with the church youth group to Mexico. Very cliche, but it was like opened my eyes to like, oh, like the rest of the world actually really exists, and this class called Spanish that I kind of like in high school was actually useful for something. Like I knew all of that in my head, but to actually experience it really kind of opened up my eyes to some possibilities. And it was coming back from that trip that I started to think, maybe someday God wants me to be a missionary. But maybe was like really a big part of that thought at that point, and someday was like a really, really long time in the future. But I did some more short-term trips, and I kept kind of thinking about it, and I went to George Fox University in Oregon, and I double majored in Spanish and international studies. So it was really fun for me to hear about all of you guys who are studying intercultural studies. I feel like we kind of have a connection there. But I was kind of going along, and I had this growing sense that maybe God really did want me to be a missionary, but I'd hear these missionary speakers, and they would talk about their call. And how there was this moment and God spoke to them and they just knew where they were supposed to go. And I thought, I have not had this experience. And so I actually started to get kind of frustrated, like, well, I feel like this is what I'm supposed to do, but I'm not having this experience like other people, so what am I doing? And then I thought, it doesn't really matter that the way God is showing this to me is different from those stories that I've heard. It just matters that God is showing me that this is something that I should pursue. And so through taking some classes and also through the influence of one of the pastors in my church, I got really interested in unreached people groups. In fact, I had said to this pastor, he was the youth pastor of my church at the time, and I said, I think maybe I should be a missionary to Latin America, because I speak Spanish, I like Latin America, I've been there, and I think it's pretty cool. And he said, no, I don't think so. He said, I think you should go somewhere where they don't have Bibles and churches and all these resources. He said, Latin America has a lot of that. I think that's what you should really think about. And I'm like, oh, okay. Started learning a bit more about unreached people groups and was just really floored to learn that there were places where there was no way that the Christian workers who were there could possibly reach all the people just because of sheer numbers. And I thought, well, what are we all waiting for? You look around at church and a whole room full of people who love Jesus. All right, people, pack your bags. Let's go to Turkey. I just had that kind of fire growing in me, but I was still trying to figure out, well, what do you do with that? And when I was in college and everybody's saying, oh, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I was like, I think I'm going to be a missionary. And people were like, oh, cool. And that was like the end of the conversation. And I thought, do they have any idea that I haven't actually figured out anything about what I'm doing? Because, you can be a doctor and be a missionary. You can be a teacher and be a missionary. You can work in IT. I have not narrowed this down at all. But I started thinking more and more, okay, unreached people groups. What could I do for an unreached people group? What's the best thing I could do for them? And I thought, well, again, lots of things you could do, but I thought really ultimately they need the Word of God, because I do not want a group that has no idea about God to rely on me as their sole source of information about Him. I can't stay with them forever, and if I'm all they have and I go away, what's going to happen? I thought that's no good. They need to be able to go directly to God's Word and say, what does it say? How does this apply to my life? That's just so key for them really being able to go deep and to connect directly with God. And so, at the age of 21, I joined Wycliffe Bible Translators. And right after I graduated from college, I moved to Papua New Guinea to do a 2-year internship doing language survey, which is basically research to figure out where new translations are needed. And my plan was, I'll do that for 2 years and I'll see, can I survive? Can I do this? Or is it all some crazy idea I came up with? And I got into it, and I was thinking, okay, if this works out, which I think it will, but I really just kind of want to get my feet wet a bit. If this works out, then I'll go into Bible translation. So I went and I did language survey for 2 years, and I loved it. It was the best job in the world, at least at the time. I was convinced that there was no better job on the face of the planet than what I was doing. Totally loved it. Felt like it was a great fit for my skills. And at the end of 2 years, I didn't go into Bible translation. I signed up to continue as a language surveyor. So I did that a couple more years, got really sick, had to leave permanently from Papua New Guinea, which broke my heart because I thought I was going to live there forever. And was back in the States for a few years, finished a graduate degree in language development, and ended up going back overseas to Thailand, where I was still working in this language research, but more on like the training and consulting end, which I also loved. And while I was there, I met Don. So we'll leave the rest of that story for later. But that is the very long version. How did I get into missions? So, and I probably should mention, because I mentioned Wycliffe and my world team recruiters over here, I am no longer with Wycliffe. After we got married, I joined World Team. So that is the organization we're currently with. But if anybody has questions about organizations, big versus small, or various ones that do translation, we'd be happy to speak to that as well.
Okay, so you've met me, you've met Margaret, and then there's this little guy here. This is Corbin. He is almost 4 years old now. I think he's about 2 right there. And this is in a Khmer church right now. So Cambodia's main population is Khmer Buddhist. And so I'm going to jump back here.
Oh, sorry.
So how many of you could find Cambodia on a map? If you hadn't seen the next slide. Okay. Most of you could probably find China, yes? Okay. So you go down the coast to Vietnam, and wrapped around is that purple country right there, Cambodia. And you can see there's the intersection of 4 rivers, so Phnom Penh is the capital, and it's right there. And we lived in Phnom Penh for the General City for 2.5 years for our first term. The first year or so was right in the city, and the subsequent year was in a suburb called Bac Mao. It was about a half an hour drive just outside. And so when we first landed, we studied the first of 2 languages. And so this is me in one of my last classes. There was a nice language school with fun teachers. There was a board. Both of our teachers here were Cambodian Christians. Not all the teachers were Christians. In fact, most of them were Buddhist. But there were some, and it was a nice, encouraging language environment. They had a nice curricula, and so it was a very good way to study language, and good way for us to ease into the language and culture in Cambodia. And then we moved out of Phnom Penh after we finished Khmer and into a Cham neighborhood.
So I'm going to interject here. Khmer is the name of the national language of Cambodia, and you do need it for your everyday life, for talking to a landlord of a prospective house, if you're going to go to the market, if you're going to talk to the policeman who just pulled you over. Khmer is good for all of those things and many more. Kind of like if you were from somewhere else and you moved to the States, you'd probably want to learn English. If you moved to Cambodia, you need to learn Khmer. But we work specifically to reach out to the Jan people, who are the Muslims in Cambodia, and they have their own language called Jem. And so we want to show you some pictures and kind of introduce you a little bit to our friends and the village where we work. Come on in. So this is my friend Brokia. And she and her husband make fishnets for a living. And because that's their primary occupation, they sit outside their home, putting one by one the little weighted beads on the nets, or repairing different ones, basically weaving these nets by hand for sale. And it's been really neat for us to be able to stop by occasionally, talk with them. They're really friendly, especially her husband always has a bit of language that he's eager to teach us. Well, the Khmer say this, but we say that, and they say this, but we say the other one. And so we really appreciated this couple and their hospitality towards us. So the Cham are about 500,000 people in Cambodia, and they are 99.9% Muslim. In contrast to most people in Cambodia would be Buddhist. And there are some believers that we know of, but there are no churches that meet regularly, no pastors. And there is a couple that's working on a Bible translation, but it's not done yet. So we want to give you an idea of what it's like to learn a minority language. What do you do when go learn this language is your job description? So this is a day in the life of the Lowe's. And at the start of the day, one of the first things we've got to do is to get Corbin settled. This is his nanny, Sita. She is from the majority. Okay. She's from the majority population. She's Khmer. And she's a really sweet Christian lady. And she was a wonderful nanny to take care of our son. We were so blessed to have her. And so we would get him settled with her in the morning, and then the two of us would take off for language learning. And one of the great things about Sita, among many, many others, is that she does not speak any English. And so Corbin was learning right along with us to get used to Cambodia and to speak another language. And so we've got a little video clip here of that. So Corbin's working on his numbers there, and for me, before I leave the house, I have to make sure I'm wearing loose-fitting clothing, my elbows are covered, my knees are covered, and I've got to make sure that I get all of this out of the way. I don't dress like that in the house because it's too hot. It's like 90 some odd degrees pretty much year-round, and I find that to dress like I would when I go outside, inside is just not practical. And actually, I found my Cham friends don't either. If you stop in unexpected at somebody's house, they're going to real quick go back in and get their head covering because they don't know they're indoors either. So they have all different kinds of styles, but really pretty much anything that will cover your hair will do. And I found this is about the coolest I can find. So this is what I usually go for in Cambodia. And then rain or shine, I take my umbrella because it's a nice sun protection and we do get a lot of rain. So if it happens to rain while we're out, I'm already good.
Hey Margaret, really quick on the numbers, was he saying all different numbers? Because they all sounded the same to me.
He
They were all different numbers.
He wasn't saying the numbers. He was asking her.
Oh.
And then she was saying the numbers.
Got it. Well, that's really cool, right? If it sounds the same to us, it's different.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true. Yes, he, in fact, and he was pretty little in that video. He was using his own sort of baby gibberish to ask, but that was his word that we all knew meant, what is this called in Khmer? He had a different word that meant, what is this called in English?
Wow.
So he knew, even before he could, kind of clearly express that with a phrase or a sentence. And he would actually get kind of upset, like we would answer in the wrong language.
Oh.
Like he had it in his head who was supposed to speak what, and was very tuned in to like which one is which. And even recently, Don was reading aloud from the Khmer Bible at home just to keep his skills up. And Corbin heard it, he goes, "That's Khmer!"
Oh.
So he likes to listen to Khmer music on YouTube. So we love our little K. He's very sweet and very, very in tune with the language.
I heard about that missionary who went, "What's this? What's that? What's this?" And they kept on giving the same answer, and eventually he figured out they're giving the word for finger.
Oh. That's funny.
So this is walking down the main street in the village where we've been studying Gem, and we go and start chatting with people, stop in, ask how they're doing, visit the fishing nets hanging up for sale, more nets, lots of nets all here along the side. You can see the mosque. The mosque is there on the right. And our teacher actually lives right behind the mosque. Her wife, she is the wife of one of the mosque leaders, and both of them teach basically Islamic studies to the children in the village. So it's been really a privilege for us to be able to study with her. When we were first telling people, oh, we're here and we're trying to learn to speak your language, they all said, go talk to that couple. You want to learn our language? Learn from that couple. And so we feel like it's given us a lot of credibility in people's eyes that we're students with them. And she's a really good teacher, and she's been really a blessing to us. In the village, in the language, one of the things, they don't just say hi, but the greeting is, where are you going or where are you coming from? And so we can say, oh, we're just kind of wandering around, just listening to language, but it comes across kind of weird. And so we try to come up with ways to fit in with a normal daily routine, and to have kind of an excuse for where we're going to be. And so we'll say, hey, let's go to the store today and buy some cookies. So this is the store between us, because it doesn't have a name. We call it store number 2. This is store number 2, and the really friendly shopkeeper who works there. Been really amazed how open people seem to be to chatting with us. We actually were told by someone who had previously learned language in this village to expect people to be kind of cold and to not really be very interested in helping us out with the language learning. And for whatever reason, by God's grace, we have not found that to be the case. We tell people like, hi, how are you doing? Do you mind if I practice language for a few minutes? And they'll say, oh, pull up a chair, have a seat. And so, like I said, we're trying to have an excuse for what we're doing, and so we'll say, well, I'm on my way to my language lesson, but it doesn't start till 10, so I have a little while, and we'll sit and chat. Oh, looks like it's getting toward the time, I better keep moving. Or we'll buy cookies at store 2, and then we'll say, hey, let's go visit so-and-so and bring them cookies. And so we're going along, oh yeah, I'm going over there to visit a friend. So it's been kind of fun just to figure out who is open to visiting with us, which seems to be most people actually who have some time, and then how we can kind of fit into being a little bit normal. We're pretty weird. We try to be at least as normal as we can be. This is our teacher who I was talking about, and this is her front porch, and that's where we have our lessons. And we'll just let you listen a little bit more to hear a little bit of the language. She's going to talk about the children and their education.
You can turn it up on the little set screen. Yep.
You got a tablet.
Tablet, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Talk about emotion.
So she was basically saying children study half day at public school there, and so they either go in the morning or the afternoon for their public school education, and then in the other half of the day, they come here and they study in Gem. and mostly Islamic topics. So they're in some ways perhaps more busy than their Khmer counterparts, because most of the kids would just have the half day and then maybe some private tutoring or other on the side. But the Jam kids have their public school, their Islamic school, and then sometimes they also look at some private tutoring on top. So they're very, very busy. So you saw the picture of the language school before. This is our study room. So it looks really different. Studying a minority language, we have to make our own curriculum, which is a little tricky since we're trying to learn the language that we're making the curriculum for. But what we're using is all picture-based. So each one of those little squares of paper represents one vocabulary item. And this was actually a review session where we put them all out, and then the teacher will say the item, and then we have to race to see who can grab the picture first and who can get the tallest stack. But it is pretty different. Studying, there are actually 3 of us. We have one other teammate who's not in this picture. And then we would share tutoring time. It was really nice. This is at our house, not at our teacher's house, so we had a second tutor who would come to our house. Much quieter environment, much easier to work on pronunciation, which is one of the things we've actually found really difficult. I think I sort of naively thought, well, I'm a linguist, this is like the 6th language I'm learning, it's gonna be fine. And it is gonna be fine, but man, the sound system in this language is killing me. They have something called tense and, oh, sorry.
So, who has taken phonetics? Okay, this is your final exam. So, how many times? 4 times?
Yeah.
You are going to hear a series of words. And the teacher's going to say it 4 times, and then the next 4 times is another word, the next 4 times another word, and see if you can hear the difference in the words.
And we should jump in and say it isn't tone, so don't listen for tone, because it's not that.
Trai, 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 trai,
New word.
telam, 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 telam,
New word.
telam, 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 telam,
New word.
bak, 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 bak,
New word.
tak, 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 tak,
New word.
tak, 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 tak.
Okay. What do we have?
Were there 4 words? You said
You
you
said
were
the
a lot.
same word 4 times,
Same word 4 times.
and then a new word.
Right, but how many words total?
Altogether,
Six.
probably 8.
Oh,
About
okay.
7. Want to hear it again?
Once is probably good.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
All right, Helen, let's hear it.
No. Okay, well, I don't remember all the words, but on the last one, there was like or it was like the last 3. For the first one, there was like a bilabial, like flat, you know, and then the next one was just like flat. There was no.
Yeah, there's the last is a set of 3, so it was back, back, and back. So the first one is actually a bilabial implosive, so it's like a B sound, the air's going in, and then the next one's back, and the next one's back, and those are incredibly difficult to tell the difference. And so who's teaching phonetics these days?
Uncle Lloyd. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, not phonetics.
Is it Floyd?
Floyd?
Oh,
So we used Rick Floyd's textbook when we learned phonetics.
No way.
Yeah. And so when we couldn't hear the difference, we flipped over his book, and there wasn't a category for the differences that we were hearing, other than what I just pointed out. So there's something called tense and lax in certain Southeast Asian languages, and you know how in English one syllable is stressed and another syllable is not stressed. Well, can you describe what stress is? Right, but in terms of phonetic qualities? Well, if you really think about it, it's like, well, if it's stressed, it's a little bit louder. Oh, so is it volume? No. Well, sometimes the pitch is a little higher. Oh, so is it tonal then? No. And you hold out the stress syllable a little longer, right? So it's actually, at least 3 features all in one that is English stress. And so in jam, you have something called tense and lax, but it's not. So Margaret, having learned Thai, said, oh, it's got to be tone. And it's true, like the tense sound is pitched a little bit higher usually. But not always, because normal Johnson is go da 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 da. And so if you go da 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 da, it's, it might go down a little bit, but it could naturally go down just because of the end of the sentence. So pitch is not the best thing to look at. And sure.
And then what's the difference between tense and lax with voiced and
Sure.
Because is that the same thing?
No. So the quality I'm describing as tense and lax has to do with the vowel. So it'd be plat, which is a little more kind of choked, and then ba, which is a little bit breathier, but its difference is really slight. So like we would have it, so ba, ba, ba would be a three-way contrast. In addition to a lot of other contrasts in language, so there's contrastive length, so how long you hold the vowel. There's contrastive aspiration as well. And so the net result is in this language there are a lot of what's called minimal pairs, which are words that sound really, really close together but are different. And Jam speakers can hear them naturally, and we have a tougher time. So.
Have you gotten into any funny miscommunication as a result?
Well, yeah. So the word to help sounds almost identical to me, but not to them. It's the word for hit.
Oh.
And so one of the things that we've actually gotten pretty involved with is helping take people who are sick in our village and can't afford good medical care to a Christian clinic that was started by World Team in order for them to get care that's both good and they can afford. And it's not far from where we live. And so as we're going around practicing in the village and we say, hey, how's it going? How are you doing? A lot of times people say, I'm really sick. We say, well, did you go to the doctor? Well, yeah, but they couldn't help me. Or, no, I haven't been because I don't have any money. So we have been doing a lot of these trips to the clinic. So this one day I had a bunch of ladies, they were all going to come in my car, take them to the clinic. Well, they're not used to riding in cars. They have no idea what to do with a seatbelt. So I had this one lady who'd come with me before and knew how to use the seatbelt. And then these other ladies who'd never been and didn't know what to do. And I was thinking, I need to ask her to help them. But I can't remember which one is which. I still don't know if I said, would you help her or would you hit her? Thankfully, they all got buckled in and there was no violence. We made our way. Probably one of the other worst language bloopers, which was due to something else. But we were memorizing this little spiel very early on to be able to go up to people and say, hello, I'm learning to speak your language. My teacher had worked with us and worked with us on this. And we knew some other vocabulary items, which in the end got me into trouble because I walked up to the first person, I mustered all of my courage to try to say this thing for the first time to someone who wasn't my teacher, and I said, hello, I'd like to buy your language. And pretty quickly she looked really confused.
And I started laughing.
Don started laughing, he knew exactly what I'd said, and then I realized what I'd said. Anyway, she looked very, very confused and a little disturbed. So that's probably the worst one I've actually done. But yeah, that's in Khmer. But yes, that was even before because Khmer also has they don't have the tense and lax, but they have some other features that are quite similar and some vowel sounds that to us sound quite close together. For example, there's these two words, jiao and jiao. They mean two different things. Well, one of them means grandchild, and Sita, who you saw earlier, Robin's nanny, had just had her first grandbaby, And she would come to work, and every day I'd try to ask her about her grandson. How's your grandson? How's your grandson? Well, I'm in language school probably 3 months later, after I've been saying this like every day. And I realize all of a sudden something clicks about the vowels, and I go, oh shoot. Every day she's coming, and I'm not saying how's your grandson, I'm saying how's your teeth? How's that little thief doing? So, you get into trouble, but people are very gracious. I couldn't believe it that she had never come out as such a, like, why are you asking me about stealing all the time? She just smiled and tell me how her grandson was. So people have been very patient and very kind to us. And I really appreciate it, because in language learning you make a lot of mistakes, and you have to be willing up front to know, I'm gonna say some really crazy things, and that's just part of learning, and you learn, and then you find funny ones, and you tell people back in the States, and make people laugh. When I was learning Thai, because it was tonal, I made a lot of mistakes that turned into like really funny sentences, and I would just entertain my Facebook friends. Hey, guess what I said today, guys? So, that was pretty fun. I actually should mention, please do not put anything on Facebook about what you hear us say tonight. You probably know that in one of these classes. But we do have some security concerns. Things aren't nearly as tight as they might be in other countries, but we're not supposed to put stuff up on social media about what we're doing. All right.
Okay, so I want to tell you about my best jam friend. His name is Yari, and that's his wife, Asisa. And we were at a language at my Tuan's house, the older woman who was the wife of the mosque leader. And we were taking lessons, and he walks up, and he says he has a medical issue. And you can't quite see, but his right leg is swollen up well over twice the size of his other leg. And possibly related is that he's lost sight in that eye right there, the same side. And so, fortunately, our mission has a hospital that's not far from where we live in Bakamau. And so, we refer him to that hospital. And what we would do for our language learning is, we could just give him a referral and send him over there, but we wanted to practice language. And so, whenever we send a patient over, if it was a man, I would go and sit with him for the day. And if it was a woman, Margaret would go and sit with her for the day. And it was good practice. And people appreciated us, giving them a ride over. And he has a very complicated medical case. He went there pretty much every week for months, and is actually still going there. But the hospital's really good. It trains Cambodians to be doctors. And one of the things is they show the Jesus film in the waiting room. Unfortunately, it's a really, really long wait. But they're showing the Jesus film in Khmer, and I had a copy of the Jesus film in Jam on my phone. Now, there's hardly anything in Jam out there. So there's no New Testament, no Old Testament. There's not even any books in Jam at all. But there is the Jesus film, and so when they were playing the Jesus film on the monitors, I put it on my phone, synced it up as best as I could, and I held it up to him. And yeah, he was able to listen to that. And a few days later, he said, that Jesus film that was showing in the waiting room in Jam, and you played in Jam, can I have that on my phone? Yes. Yes, you can. So, able to get that to him. And and not long after that, we'll talk about it, we had to go back to the U.S. and Yari insisted that he wanted to see us off at the airport. Now, it takes about an hour to drive to the airport from where we lived. He had a motorbike, so he could get there a little bit faster, but it's still quite a distance. And none of our other friends actually insisted on meeting us at the airport, so I was always like, no, it's okay. And he would just keep on bringing it up. And so finally, okay, our flight leaves then. And he came, and he brought his wife. And so right before we left, he gives me this book. It's in Khmer, and it's on Muhammad. I look at it, I look at him, and he says, there's stuff about Jesus in there too. And so it's odd. His way of showing love to me is to share about his prophet. And he knows that my way of showing love is to share about Jesus. So we've continued corresponding. It's funny, we always spoke in Jam because whenever we're learning language, we insist to speak in the language that we're learning. But he doesn't write Jam, and so we've actually been communicating Khmer via WhatsApp. And you might be able to guess, it's very difficult to use your phone to write Khmer scripts. I wish I could show you on the phone later, but you have like 2 different keyboards. You hold it down to a key to get to another one. You have a shift key to have, Khmer is the largest alphabet in the world. I mean, obviously it's not as difficult as like Chinese, but as far as like alphabet size, it's the largest. It's also syllabic, so there's the ka, there's a subconsonant, and there's 2 vowel signs on it, which could go above, below, left, or right. So it's pretty complicated. And if there wasn't word completion, I don't think I would be able to say it. But yeah, we've been continuing to communicate, and his wife is pregnant with her first, and is due to give birth next month. And Yari is also due to get eye surgery from the hospital, and we're hoping that he'll get his sight back. We are also praying that he'll also be able to see Jesus. Okay. This is another John family. This is actually our teacher, Mike Doohan, and that's my twin's daughter. Do you want to guess where this is? Santa Ana. So we passed by Santa Ana on the way up here.
I know, like the carpet.
Oh, yeah.
So there is a Jam community in Santa Ana. There's also a Jam community in Fullerton, another one in Pomona. So we were able to go and visit family and practice our rusty Jam, and they're very gracious. So this is one of the things that we're doing while we're back in America, because our little boy, Corbin, was diagnosed with autism in July. And so we had to make a quick decision. We decided to come back to the States for treatment for him. And it was hard, especially leaving a short time frame. We basically picked up and moved in a month, and we had to say goodbye to a bunch of our friends. Our poor nannies, Corbin's poor nanny just bawled her eyes out. Fortunately, they were able to use Facebook video and chat with each other. But yeah, we're pretty confident now that we made the right decision. Our son is making a lot of progress. He's speaking, he's playing with other kids, which he never did in Cambodia. He's doing really well. So while we're here, I'm finishing my master's in applied linguistics and biotranslation at GIAL, which is now called Dallas International University. I have a semantics and pragmatics final on Friday.
Yay.
So yeah, the goal of that, there is an SIL couple, a Korean couple who've been working on the John New Testament. They've been working with John for almost, about 17 years probably. They're the longest running missionaries to the Jam. The husband of that couple fell off a roof about a year and a half ago, delayed the translation, but they're finishing it now. The wife has chronic health issues, but being very stalwart Koreans, they're insisting that they're going to be in Cambodia for the rest of their life and finish. I hope they do, I pray they do. In case they don't, I'm studying Bible translation and reviewing my Hebrew, such that after the New Testament's finished, I'll be able to have an Old Testament for the Jam. I've also been speaking at a few conferences. How many of you have seen this book? Probably not, because it's really expensive. Normally, I wrote a chapter in the book, And normally you see a stack of books over there and say, hey, you should buy this, except for one thing is that I don't get any royalties for it. In fact, I don't actually own my own copy because it's that expensive. And the extent of my compensation for that was one PDF copy of that book. So I only bought one copy and I gave it to my dad over there. But the chapter that I wrote was on Bible translation to Muslim audiences, especially the Son of God issue with regarding to Wycliffe and SIL, the World Evangelical Alliance decision, talking about that issue. So if any of you are interested, we'll talk about that later. Okay. We only operate off the fuel of prayer of the saints. And so, a number of things that we'd like prayer for. Corbin's health especially. He's making great progress. We plan to return to the States in about a year and a half. To Cambodia in a year and a half when he turns 5. And he'll be able to start kindergarten. We're also looking for someone to be able to do therapy with him when we return to Cambodia. So, hoping that God will make our path straight for that. And we're also looking for more teammates. Right now we're the only couple working among the JOM with our agency. There's just a handful of others with other agencies we're working on with JOM. There's 500,000 JOM. We really would like to have more teammates, and if you're interested, talk to us, talk to Daniel about World Team. We've really felt blessed to be part of World Team. We can talk about that more if you'd like. For language learning, being able to get those words straight, being able to say, oh, that's tense, that's lax, that's the long short vowel, that's the final consonant, and be able to know right away what the word is. It's tough. So if the teacher is sitting right in front of me in the quiet room and she says the 2 words next to each other, I can get it about 85%. Put it in a long sentence, go out in the village where there's squawking chickens and construction, a little bit tougher. So we're devoted to get to a level of fluency to be able to minister in the heart language, to be able to share new concepts about the gospel to them, and to do it in a way that reaches them. So you can pray for that. It takes a lot of perseverance. And ultimately, our goal is to plant churches among them. That is the purpose of our ministry, our organization, is to see the gospel go out, to see JOM believers leading the churches, not us, having our own church, but to have the believers going out and sharing the gospel for themselves, and to establish leadership in the churches, and to be reproduced and multiply. And that's all I have.
All right.
Break time.
Shall we take a quick 5-minute break, grab some more pizza, and then we'll do some Q&A and ask some questions. Sound good? Thank you guys. This is awesome. Why don't you up here?
I was going to ask, I noticed that in Santa Ana you had more of a head covering than you did when you were in Cambodia. What was the reason for that?
It's not so hot here. When we went to the winter, it was actually cold. In fact, I went and I bought a long top that I felt would be appropriately long and baggy to wear, because all of my clothes I wear in the village I was gonna freeze. So that was one of the main things. I do have some of the more kind of Islamic style head coverings that I bought in Cambodia, and I wore them a few times and I didn't like it. I felt like I was in disguise, and because people were first meeting me, I felt like I was presenting myself as though I were Muslim, and that I didn't want people to feel like, later on when they found out that it wasn't, like, why did you trick us? I don't know that people actually would, but that was the way I felt at the time, and so I felt more comfortable going with this kind of more hippie bandana style that they don't usually wear. It was still modest, but I felt more me. And so I feel like maybe as people get to know us more, our language skills develop a lot better. We can explain better when people ask, why are we here? People ask a lot if we're Muslim, and at the moment, the most that we know how to say is, I believe that there's one God and I follow Jesus the Messiah, which always gets really strange looks. We don't fit into anybody's box. But as we're able to have more conversation about what do we believe, who are we, what is our purpose in Cambodia, I think I may feel more free to dress in a more Islamic style, but I just didn't want people to feel like I was being fake. And I didn't want to feel myself like I was being fake, and so I chose, like I said, within the realm of what they would consider modest, I chose something that felt a little more neutral. But our teacher's daughter, I felt like it would be okay if I dressed, more Muslim. And also, like I said, I was freezing cold, which is why I don't wear a head wrap like that. One of the other reasons, because it's just very, very hot.
I think just with that, so something we in our cultural studies talk a lot about is this idea of contextualization, and everyone has a different idea of how much to look like them, how much to act like them. It sounds like you are thinking about this, but I'm curious, like, what are some of the ways in which you are comfortable contextualizing and what ways not, especially in the Muslim context?
So you want to address the what are you? Are you Muslim?
Well, we already kind of talked about that, because people will say, are you Muslim?
Right.
And we don't say yes or no. We just say what we believe. And the main purpose for that really is that, as in many places in the world, Muslims have a very stereotypical idea of what a Christian is. And that idea that some people have of what a Christian is not what we actually believe in practice. And so we were advised by someone who had worked there before us, don't just say, no, I'm a Christian, because that's not going to help people know what you believe. Give them a little short summary. He recommended saying, I believe there's one God and I follow Jesus the Messiah. And it kind of, gives some clarification. And yet at the same time, it opens up this whole can of worms for people. And like Diane, this one woman was looking and she goes, oh, so you're half Muslim. I was like, no. At that point, I just went in with a no, I'm not half Muslim. I was like, I have clearly greatly confused her. But I think also within that is the idea that she was recognizing that some of what she might have expected me to say, if I just said I was a Christian, I wasn't matching that. Some of what I was saying was matching her Muslim category. So it gets really tricky at the Christian hospital we were talking about, because there you have Chan people and you have Khmer people right next to each other. And in fact, I was so embarrassed this one day, because I had this, I'm sure, probably well-meaning Christian Cambodian lady come up and start lecturing my Muslim friends. And she was, like I said, I think probably her heart was in the right place, but she came across really rude and really aggressive. Oh, you don't believe this, and you don't believe that, and you should believe like this. And she just kind of went off. And I was thinking, like, please just be nice to these people who need some medical care. Don't drive them away, please. But then after she went on her whole rant about these things, she turns to me and goes, so, what about you?
Oh.
And, I had my head covering on. I was dressed, appropriately to be with my Muslim friends. But even the words, which this gets back to contextualization, the words that you would use even in Khmer, like the name for God, the name for Jesus, the Muslims use different words for that than the Buddhist background people. The Buddhist background people borrow from Buddhism, and some transliteration like for Jesus from Christianity, but the Muslim background people borrow from Islamic terms like Arabic. And so I'm like, great, like, what am I supposed to do? And so I had to do the best I could in Khmer, which is what we were all speaking in this conversation. And I said in Khmer, there is only one master, and I follow Jesus the Messiah, and I use the, like what the Cambodian Buddhist background people would call him, and then I said, who the John call Isa Masih. And that was about the best I could do on the spot, but I would say that is my most tricky context, because I'm dealing with people from Buddhist background and Muslim background in the same room. And honestly, I don't like it, because it puts me on the spot in really uncomfortable ways, and yet I do think that the Cambodian church has a long way to go to really catch the vision for reaching their Jam neighbors, and I think that more understanding is helpful. So we don't allow pork in our home in Cambodia, and we don't eat it when we're in Cambodia within the boundaries. If we go out to Thailand, we'll eat it. If we come back to the States, you know, there's pepperoni on the pizza, I won't ask if there's pork in it or not, I'll just eat it. But when we're in Cambodia, we don't. And so when people will ask us, they'll say, do you eat pork? And we say, well, I don't eat it here in Cambodia. But even sometimes somebody said, well, what about when you go back to America? Will you eat it? Yep. And then when I go back to America.
So half Muslim.
But, you know, we're trying as much as we can to be respectful, and also like not allowing it in our home isn't because we think it's wrong, but we want our John friends to feel comfortable that if they come over, they eat at our house. You know, we are not going to serve them pork. You know, we haven't been cooking pork, you know, yesterday or last year in our house. We just don't do that. So we don't drink pork in the country. We don't eat pork or drink it.
You don't drink it either.
We don't drink alcohol when we're in Cambodia, and that's really out of respect for our John friends and to try to help them feel comfortable and to feel that we are morally upright people.
But the Khmer eat pork and they eat just about everything else. So we're constantly picking through. It's like, well, does it have pork or not? And like, you know, their pork and their chicken, they all look the same. So it's, their beef's, you know, kind of lighter colored. So we had my Khmer teacher came over to the house and had this poster. It had like, you know, 1 elephant, 2 dogs, 3 cats, yeah, up to 12. And he looks at the poster and says, I've eaten 11 of those. So, all except the elephant. He had eaten all the animals, whereas horses, cats, dogs.
You're obviously still, you know, learning a lot about the people that you're with as you're learning the language. What have you learned so far about kind of like, if you want to call it like their version of Islam? Like, is there a lot of folk religion to it? Do they pray 5 times a day, men and women? Not really. Like, what are you finding?
There's actually 3 distinct Jam groups, and so there's one group that actually only speak Khmer, and so people think that maybe they came from a different origin. And then there are 2 Jam groups. One is more orthodox, and one is more folk. So one group is called Jengbang, which is it's probably about 80% of Jam, which is more traditional. They have teachers from Malaysia come up to help teach them, and then there's a group called Imam San, which is more folk. It's named after an Imam San who practiced some sort of did some miracles that made him revered, and he said, you don't have to do your prayers 5 times a day, you only have to do it once a week on Friday. Yeah, so they call like the 5-timers, people who do it 5 times a day, and there's the 1-timers who do it once a week. But the Imam San group is getting smaller because the Malaysians and others are paying money for these unorthodox Islam groups to become orthodox, and so the number of Imam San is getting smaller, but some of them are pretty stalwart about their kind of more Chamic ways. And the Imam San would use the ancient Chamic script.
I have a question. So, what do you guys do at church? Do you go to church regularly?
Sure. On the first slide is inside a Khmer church, and so we would actually not quite sneak out, but we would go to our Khmer church on Sundays. There's no Jam church at all, so we continued to go into them, and it was a bit of a drive. We felt it was important, and taking fellowship. But yeah, they would have meals afterwards, and I remember the first time we told them we didn't eat pork. This is one of those like mic drop moments where everyone put their spoon down. I was like, what? Why? But I think we talked with them about what we do, and there's actually a few people in there who have a heart for reaching John. So, yeah, and the other thing, this also goes back to contextualization. I play bass guitar occasionally at the Khmer church. The Cham think musical instruments and singing is a sin. So, which is slightly depressing for me since I love music so much, and the Khmer are always cranking up loud music and playing guitar and having those kind of musical parties, whereas that doesn't really exist among the Jam. So it was hard for me to find opportunities to hang out. There's, Khmer are always drinking too. Obviously, I don't participate in that, but for the Jam, smoking is not a sin. So mostly, if I want to hang out with men, there's a bunch of men hanging out smoking, which is not really my scene either. But regarding contextualization, there's no Jam churches, so what a contextualized Jam gathering would be yet to be determined. But certainly, we think singing is a command in Scripture. We want to have that. We're still doing a little more research. We found out that there's actually a different word for sing that is a religious song in the Jam language, which is acceptable. But the general word for singing, that's a sin. And we haven't quite nailed down exactly what the difference is, but we would want to dig down and say, well, can we use that to sing worship songs in a contextualized worship service? What would you have to do to make sure that's accepted? And even if we couldn't make it accepted, we still think singing needs to be part of the worship. So that's something that is going to require a little bit more study.
What are the relations of the Gem Muslim community and the Christians?
Sure. Great question. For the most part, very peaceful. They were both slaughtered during Khmer Rouge, so say like 20. So Khmer Rouge was from 75 to 79, and I think the estimate is about a quarter of the country died under that. The estimation for Jam is about 50 to 80% of Jam died under Khmer Rouge, and that was because they're a religious minority and because the Jam actually fought back. And so when they fought back, entire villages were slaughtered. A lot of the Jam survivors pretended they were Khmer. So actually, there's like a genocide committee that looks at all these, and I think they recently decided that yes, Khmer Rouge does count as a genocide because of what the Khmer Rouge did to the Jam. Because technically a genocide has to be a different ethnic group. It's like, oh, it's not really genocide. But since they had that shared history, I think they get along decently well. At the same time, I talked to my Khmer language teacher. Oh, we're going to learn Jam afterwards, and he kind of pulled me aside. I was like, well, let me tell you about what the Jam. They would say stuff like, oh, the Jam are brothers with the pig because they don't want to eat it, or they would say, oh. If you go find a teacher among the Jam, make sure you get the right kind of teacher, because you might find what he called a love teacher, which is basically when Khmer find someone they fancy, they go to a Jam kind of witch doctor or some sort, and they get a love potion from them. So it's very interesting when Khmer go to the Jam for a potion, but at the same time we talk to Jam people and they go to Khmer witch doctors. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say there's pretty good relationships between the groups. Certainly no violence between them, but there are these kind of prejudices and stereotypes. They do live in kind of separate parts of town, so we actually weren't able to find a good place to be able to rent in the village. Like that would have been our ideal, to have, you know, John neighbors on every side. But most people, if they had a property available that they weren't living in themselves, they wanted to sell it. They didn't want to rent it. And so we ended up in a place that seemed like it would be workable, about a 15-minute walk from the village, but all of our neighbors are Khmer. And then you walk along and you pass the school, and the school's about half John kids and half Khmer kids, and you walk a little further and it's like pretty much all of a sudden you're in the John village.
So no more spirit houses in front. So that's all the Buddhists have, spirit houses. All the dogs in the neighborhood, all of a sudden there's no dogs in the neighborhood.
All the women are all of a sudden covering their heads. So it's pretty distinct. They kind of live in their own community and pretty much kind of right around the mosque. The area where we live, they are the 5 times a day prayer, more traditional Islamic style Muslims. And so, you know, the men need to go regularly to the mosque, so it's kind of a hardship for them if they're far away. And I think that's one of the things that kind of holds their communities together geographically. That said, there are jams scattered throughout Cambodia. It's not like there's just this one area that's the jam region. There are jam in pretty much every province. And so you'll find, you know, a jam area next to a Khmer area, next to another jam area, and they're just kind of scattered throughout.
And I'm guessing then that the Khmer Christians don't have a missional focus, nor do the jams towards the Khmer Buddhists or Christians.
No, most of the Khmer convert to Islam is through marriage. So it's usually towards Islam.
Yeah. Intermarriage between the groups is pretty common, but the jam require that the spouse from the Buddhist background become Muslim. And Buddhists are pretty relaxed about that sort of thing, so it's not like, oh, whatever.
You go first. That's all right. I asked a question already. So.
Okay. I'm just curious more about like the language process and how have you guys used like IPA, things you learned about linguistics, and how has your previous knowledge really helped you with what you're doing now?
Yeah, we both studied at GIL at different times. We haven't gone that far of the story yet, have we? But we both took phonetics at separate times, and so in our language school, actually for Khmer, they used IPA, or at least a form of IPA. So when we studied jam, there's always different sounds. I used IPA to notate everything, so I have a pretty thick notebook of things in IPA. Obviously, you shouldn't start writing things in IPA right away because you have to get a sense or feel of what's distinct in the language and what's not. So it's generally recommend that you don't start transcribing until at least a few months in. But Margaret never transcribed because she's more of an oral learner, and so while I have this big fat notebook of words, and Margaret would just go around the house with her recorder and play it all the time. That's her way of studying. So, you know, different strategies, and each of them worked well for us, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the most helpful things that I would recommend to any of you who are looking at going into another country to learn the language, there is a class that's offered at a few different places. One of them is GIAL, where we both studied. But it's called Second Language and Culture Acquisition, and it's an intensive course, and it's designed to teach you what do you do to learn a language when there's no trained teacher, no textbook, no classroom, and they walk you through a process of how to put together your own curriculum and how to design it even though you're the one who's learning it. And so they basically teach you how to teach somebody to be your tutor. So I really highly recommend that class. I feel like that has been one of the more practical linguistic classes I've ever taken. Certainly other ones have been really helpful to me, but that class in particular, I think has made this whole idea of like, all right, we're gonna go and we're gonna learn a language and we've gotta figure out how to do that. That's made it a lot less intimidating. So I would really recommend that. So that where we offered a GIS, which that school doesn't exist anymore, just called it LACA, Language and Culture Acquisition.
So for the sake of time, we'll end with the last question that you had, Ben. And then if you could please tell us your love story, because we all and then we'll end with Daniel sharing a little bit about Growth Team, and then we'll pray for you guys. Does that sound good for everyone? Okay. All right, so Ben.
If the answer to the first question is really short and easy, then I have to know, which is the one I want to ask. I was going to ask if you have met any John Christians.
Yes.
Yes.
You do? Okay. Here?
No.
Or there?
There.
Okay. And then regarding that, like, do you think that due to there being so very few, it would be right for you to ask them, do you think that you also are supposed to translate and help in that way? Like for the Bible.
To try to get them involved in the translation
Yeah.
program?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some of them are. So there's, I think we've met at least 4. I can think about them. And
3 that we personally met.
there's a couple actually just got married that are helping with the Bible translation.
Mm.
And there's another young man named Tess, who's a believer, but he's mostly going to my Cambodian church. But yeah, so there was a lot of problems finding helpers for the translation on that they weren't believers, and so they would hire a bunch of people and then find out it's for translating the Bible and they would leave. And so between the vision trip when I went to Cambodia and when we came back, I think it was only 3 or 4 years in between, and then I think pretty much everyone turned over. Everyone who I saw was helping with translation before weren't there anymore.
Including Christians.
I don't think any of them were Christian at the time. Because when I went, there was about like 9 teenage girls who were helping out with the translation, all typing on laptops, and it was basically that they were the only demographics that the John didn't care was helping the Christians translating the Bible. But when I came back, there was only a couple, one man, one woman who was helping with it, and so maybe the woman was one of those previous 9. Yeah, it really turned over.
I know the translators have been trying to get some new people. They recently had someone who came and joined them for like a day or maybe a couple days and decided it wasn't for him and he quit. I think he was actually a believer. So they're trying to do some things. They're trying to get the believers. They recently had a gathering of believers to try to talk about like religious terminology for the Bible, key terms. To try to make sure that the words that they're choosing make sense to people and are good ones to represent, concepts like faith or grace or things like that. So they are trying to get the believers involved, but it's been a really, really difficult process. And the number of believers, of known believers, has recently gone up. There was a guy who was doing a PhD study who was studying about conversion, and as he was doing that and traveling through the provinces and asking the people who were believers who he met how many other believers they knew of, those numbers have gone up. But at the time we moved to Cambodia, I think in the whole country we only heard reports of about 50 John believers anywhere. Now that number is probably a few hundred. But still very scattered. There's been like an evangelist who's done a lot of itinerant evangelism. So people will hear and believe, but then not have the Bible, not have a church, not have really any follow-up, nobody to disciple them. And so they hang on to their belief, but they don't have a whole lot to hang on to, and it's created the situation where even with a few hundred believers, there's still no churches.
Spread out.
Yeah, spread out and without, kind of without anybody to really lead or teach them. All right, how shall we start this story? We'll cover it from the beginning to it.
Sure. So I had always told myself that I wasn't going to do online dating, and I said maybe when I turn 30 I'll do online dating, but it seemed so far out there, and then I turned 30 and I thought, shoot.
I have to.
So I sucked up my pride and I signed up on this site called Margaret Lowe. I think it's still around. So I put up this nice long profile and put witty quotes and made it all nice, and dated a couple people long distance and they didn't work out, and finally I was super fed up with it. I was like, well, gee, I'm just gonna go to the mission field. So I cleared out my entire profile and I left. I've been accepted by a missions agency to go to Southeast Asia, do church planting and Bible translation, and no longer dating. Because I forgot to mention, the reason why I signed up for this site was it was a flat fee for lifetime membership, and so I thought this could take a while, so that was the one I picked. And since I had a lifetime membership, I couldn't just close it, so I might as well leave something on there. So that's what I put up on that.
So, meanwhile, he was living in San Diego, preparing to go to Cambodia with the World Team, and I was living in Thailand, working for Wycliffe, and I also had been doing online dating on a different, much larger site. I was totally fed up because I hadn't met anybody who wanted to do missions, like seriously the way that I wanted to do missions. Or a few people had been matched with me, but it didn't go anywhere at all. And I thought, I'm just not meeting the right kind of people doing this. There's all these, sure, they sound like nice guys, responsible people, love the Lord, want to live in America and raise a family. And that's not a bad thing, but that was not what I was looking for. I had already made the mistake of being in a really serious relationship with somebody who didn't share my calling. And that ended up in really heartbreak for both of us because we just weren't at the same place in life with our journeys. And so I was like, I'm not doing that again. But I wasn't meeting people who wanted to do missions. I mean, I tried to mess with the app and check all the countries except America. I tried to force it to send me missionaries, and it wasn't working. And I was telling this to one of my friends in Thailand, and she said, my friend in Laos met her husband on this other site, and it's a lot smaller, but you might find more like-minded people. I think you should try it. And I was like, I don't know. Maybe I should just forget this whole online thing. This is just a mess. And I was like, okay, I'll take a look at it. So the way Margaret Lowe works, it's more like Facebook than eHarmony or something. eHarmony makes you it sends you a match, the match of the day or whatever. And, then you can decide if you want to go any further in corresponding with that person or not. Whereas Margaret Lowe is a community, an online community of people. And so you can see anybody's profile. So I went through, where are the guys who want to do missions? And Don had this very nice, distinct profile that said he'd been accepted by a missions agency to do church planting and Bible translation in Southeast Asia. And I said, I have to talk to this guy. But it said he was in San Diego and no long distance. I said, well, I can say hi. It doesn't say no saying hi. So I said hi. And I said, I saw the thing about no long distance, no big deal, just a friendly note from a fellow worker, tell me more about what you're going to be doing. And we started messaging a little bit, found out really quickly that we'd both been to the same graduate school, but we'd missed each other by a year. We'd even been part of the same, like, home Bible study at this one professor's house, and we had a bunch of mutual friends, and pretty soon we were talking about Bible translation and Asia and sociolinguistics, and I thought
I
for...
think the only reason she married me is because I knew what a language survey was.
But, yeah, we had so much in common, we started emailing, but it was all like friendly, like not romantic. But about 3 months of this went by, we were emailing pretty much every day, and I thought, man, for somebody who doesn't do long distance, he's doing a really good job. But I had no idea if he was actually interested in me. So I was telling my woes to this friend of mine, another friend from the same graduate school. She worked in Cambodia, but she was in Thailand for a conference, and a really close friend of mine. We'd actually been roommates when we were both studying in Dallas. And I was like, yeah, there's this guy, and I really like him, but I don't know if he likes me, blah, 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 blah. Well, she found out he was going to be going to Cambodia for a vision trip to check out ministry opportunities, and she said, you have to come see me in Cambodia. You should come see me when Don's going to be there. I was like, no. I don't even know if he likes me. I have no idea if he wants to meet me. I could not possibly be so forward as to just plan to be where he's going to be. But she twisted my arm, and I planned to be in Cambodia when he was going to be there. And so he decided that maybe meeting me wouldn't be terrible. And as God would have it, my friend Rachel lived literally like one street around the corner from where his hosts were, even though they didn't actually even know each other. So he was pretty busy on his trip, but as he had time, he would come over and we'd hang out, and
It was fun.
it was fun. So I still didn't know if he likes me, because he didn't say anything about it the whole trip.
Well, you didn't either.
True.
So on that vision trip, I spent a week in Cambodia and a couple weeks in Indonesia. And so after I was still trying to decide which field to go to, but after I came back to the States after Indonesia, and asked her out, and we started dating long distance, and it worked.
So we met in May. We started dating in what, June, July? And then in October, he came to see me in Thailand. He was going to a conference there and made some extra time to come see me. And I was actually having some pretty bad health problems with migraines that were like every day and wouldn't go away. And my family was really worried, and the doctor in Thailand wasn't very helpful. And so my family wanted me to come back to the U.S. So I actually traveled back to California when Don came back, and saw some doctors and spent more time with him. We got engaged in December and married in March. So it all happened pretty quick. But it's been great. We've been married 6 years. And yeah, just really, really thankful. I went through a lot of years where I didn't know if I was ever going to meet anybody. I mentioned the previous relationship I'd been in that didn't work out, and I really think I felt like that was maybe my last chance, and I watched it go bye-bye. And it was the right choice, even if I'd never met Don. That relationship was clearly not a good one for me. But it was very hard to say, I'm really committed to this missions life. And whether God brings me a husband or whether he doesn't, this is what I really think I should be doing and what I want to be doing with my life. And I just want to encourage all of you who are single, like, don't let that stop you from following what God's leading you to do. I also believe that if I had not been on the mission field, I never would have met Don. And that would have been like the biggest tragedy of my entire life. So marriage is great, missions is great, but serve God with what you have, in the time of life where you are, And don't be afraid that it's gonna close the doors on you and for those hopes that you hold for life and family, because that won't necessarily happen. You know, and God knows whether we're here or there, how our lives and our families are gonna turn out. But I just wanna tell you, don't be afraid. God has good plans.